This story began when an ordinary guy who went to school and lived together with his mom once got a flower pot on his head and died. After such a sad event, he was reborn into a predatory flower with a big mouth and an evolution system, which is represented by an ugly service spirit. He found himself a faithful friend, a gecko, and one day they got a dragon egg from which a baby dragon hatched. They worked hard to feed her, but she grew very fast and always needed more food. And so when our flower caught a rat, a brazen eagle thief dared to steal his prey. Wu Sun couldn't contain his anger, and he wasn't going to forgive this insolent, overgrown chicken for stealing his prey. He shouted at the flying eagle to come back, damn it, simultaneously trying to hit it with barbs, hurling them one after another. His plant ammunition raced toward its target at lightning speed. It seemed as if the villain was about to receive a just punishment and his chicken ass would be slapped. But the eagle was too high and only mockingly looked at his pathetic attempts and barbs, which simply did not reach him. He was quite pleased with himself. Taking the prey from another weakling was a very successful move for him. Besides, what could these pathetic ground creatures without wings do to him? This only made Wu Sun more angry, but he couldn't do anything about it. He had already realized that the eagle was too high, but his powerlessness only made him more annoyed. But what happened next surprised our hero even more, and the eagle was pushed to the background. The little dragoness, having seen the example of her so-called daddy, decided to copy him. She too started waving her arms angrily and shouting, "Bad eagle!" Wu Sun looked at her pathetic attempts and advised her to stop because the eagle had already flown away, and she was only shaking the air in vain. But she was a naughty little girl, and not at all ordinary, so she managed to surprise her daddy. She continued to run screaming what a bad rascal that eagle was, and at the same time she began to glow with a bright golden light. It seemed like an epic transformation was about to take place. And so it did. That little ball of fury began its transformation into something more intimidating than a cute little dragon girl. In a moment, she was transformed into a true white dragon who, although small in size, was determined to chase down her abuser who dared to steal their food. Our flower and gecko's jaw dropped from such a transformation because he simply could not believe that in front of him was a real dragon. And it looked just like the dragon that had killed those people. Now Wu Sun was beginning to worry about his own skin. The newly minted dragon had already accelerated to the ground. However, instead of flying majestically, something was wrong. The dragon could not control its wings and tail properly and could barely stay in the air. Covered in sweat, he was shivering, and there was only one outcome to his convulsive movements. The dragon finally realized with horror that he would not fly so long and a kiss with the ground was waiting for him. And so it happened, as he accelerated after his flight. He landed painfully back on the ground, plowing the ground with his face. It turned out that even such rare and majestic creatures as dragons need training and practice, and even they can't fly into the sky just like that. Watching all this, our flower and gecko didn't know how to react. Now their clearing was like a battlefield and dust was rising from it in all directions. Wu Sun, however, realized that it was because it was her first time flying and that she lacked basic skills and would definitely learn everything in time. A crater was formed at the site of the fall, in the middle of which a bright golden flash had already reappeared, and Wu Sun asked the gecko to go and see if their little girl had been injured in the fall. However, the gecko had no sooner moved than the sound of crying filled their clearing. The little girl was crying as hard as she could and was already on her way to her daddy. All the simple dreams of the poor girl had been shattered, and now she had to be calmed down immediately. Because now the little girl was running around the clearing with screams and crying, complaining to her daddy how much it hurts her. Our flower didn't even know what to do, how to calm his little girl, as he had no experience in such matters. Finally, he came to his senses and began to calm his daughter, asking her to stop crying and promising that he would help her to punish that nasty eagle. But all in due time, and she will have to wait a little. But she still did not calm down and continued to cry. Finally deciding that calming her down was useless, Wu Sun decided to find out what kind of dragon she was. And remembering her appearance after her transformation, he assumed that she was similar to Ying Lun from the classic of mountains and seas. Looking at her, he realized that she would grow up very quickly, so he needed to give her a name soon, because he couldn't call her his daughter all the time and always refer to her that way. He had to think of a suitable name for her, and based on her dragon-like appearance, he decided to call her Yin Yun. It wasn't a bad name. Now that she had a name, it was worth focusing on more important things. Remembering how birds train their chicks to fly and show them their own example, he wondered what he should do with his little girl. And while little Yin Yun can't fly properly, she needs to train. But the question was how to help her, because he himself is just an ugly flower with a bad temper and a big mouth. Hell, he can't even move. How can he teach her how to fly if he can't show her anything? But first, he decided to ask her if she liked her new name, Yin Yun. To do so, he started from afar and solemnly announced to his daughter that she had grown up and it was time for her to have her own name. Then he asked her what she thought about Daddy calling her Yin Yun. She liked that name and it sounded great. Then she finally calmed down and went back to her dragon form to try again. And our flower finally figured out how to show her what to do too. To demonstrate, he came up with the idea of using his whips, weaving them together in such a way to show Yin Yun what she was required to do. Dragoness was at first frightened by this demonstration, fearing that Daddy had decided to spank his naughty daughter. But as it turned out, he waved only to show that from today, he is ready to help his daughter to train and learn to fly. Today, he decided to show her how to flap her wings and stay stable in flight. To do this, he asked her to come closer and stand on the so-called hand of her daddy. She obeyed and clumsily climbed onto his hand, trembling from exertion and effort. Our flower was amused by such an attempt, but he kept instructing her to work her wings more actively while flying and to try again right away. Yin Yun obeyed, and literally after a few flaps she soared into the sky and quite swiftly. At first glance it seemed that now she would definitely succeed, but it only seemed. Because in the air the little one was not so good, and her too convulsive and detached movements were too clumsy for a long flight. Our flower cheered her up as best she could and advised her to keep trying her best and not to be afraid to look and fly forward. A painfully familiar memory of his mother teaching him how to ride a bicycle floated before Woo-sun's eyes. Now it was clear to him exactly what it reminded him of teaching a dragon to fly. Back then, his mom had advised him to keep his transportation steady, keep his balance, and not be afraid to move forward. Now he understood the hard work his mother had done, and how he wished he had been grateful enough to her for it all. But unfortunately, there was nothing he could do. There was no turning back. He was brought out of his memories by the whistling sound of the dragon starting to fall. He shouted to her to be careful and hold on, but it was too late. The speed she had gained in the steep peak left her no chance to regain her balance, and with every second she was getting closer to the ground. Luckily, she was not that high up, and quite quickly her aerial journey ended in the nearest bushes where she fell with a thud. Woo-sun, worried for her life, immediately started shouting, asking Yin Yun if she was okay. The gecko didn't stand still either and ran to the crash site with all his legs. All of them were so worried that the child they cared so much about wouldn't get hurt from such a hard fall. Finally, the bushes moved, but they moved as if there was some kind of struggle. Our flower continued to desperately ask her daughter Yin Yun what was going on and how was she, but there was no answer. Finally, the bushes quieted down, and Yin Yun came out of them holding a snake in her teeth. She rather boasted to her daddy to see what kind of snake she had caught. All bruised but very happy, she went back to our flower, who kept asking if she was hurt or bitten by that poisonous snake. But Yin Yun reassured him and told him not to worry, because she had done everything just as he had taught her, and had bitten the snake herself so that it could not do anything. Now Woo-sun was just shining with joy. At last, his little girl had grown up enough to hunt snakes on her own, and now he and the gecko could breathe a sigh of relief and not worry so much about how to feed her. This was the best news for him today, because he would finally be able to rest as he had dreamed. After a few days, Yin Yun had gotten completely used to her dragon form, and had learned to fly properly without landing on her face. And now she was constantly flying above our flower, as if guarding its peace. Woo-sun watched her rapturously, marveling at how easily and effortlessly she flew now. Every day she was getting better and better at it. And now he even began to envy her, because he himself had no wings, and he would like to fly as freely, easily, and effortlessly as she did. The gecko also looked at all this with his mouth wide open, not hiding his admiration. Seeing that she was getting too far away from them, Woo-sun had already started waving for her to go back and not fly so far away. But she didn't pay any attention to him, and he thought that now that she had the vast expanse of the sky in front of her, she didn't care about the pathetic bugs on the ground. It seemed like that was the case because soon Yin Yun disappeared from their sight, and only the blue sky with clouds was left above them. Now they had no words to express their disappointment at how they had been shamelessly abandoned. How dare she just fly off into the distance and not even say thank you to them for everything? After 5 minutes, they finally came out of their daze, and Woo-sun awkwardly asked the gecko if he thought that she had flown to find her birth mother and now abandoned them forever. All he got in response was silence and the howling of the wind. And so another 20 minutes passed in silence. And our flower was only more convinced that his guesses were correct, since she still has not returned. He thought how quickly she'd grown up and left him. I guess parents feel the same way when their kids leave and go off to college. When he was almost completely desperate, a winged silhouette suddenly appeared in the sky in the distance. When they saw it, they glowed with happiness, and it was their little girl Yin Yun who had decided to return. But looking closer, all his joy faded away and was replaced by fear and tension. It wasn't their little girl at all, but that damn eagle. Our flower did not understand why he came back. There was nothing to steal. Did he really want to chew on the roots? But it was not like that. It seemed that the eagle was in a panic and was running away from someone. And the reason was right behind him and gradually approaching him. It was Yin Yun, who was very serious and had actually flown specifically to find this eagle and pluck its feathers. Seeing her return, Wu Sun glowed with happiness and said that he had always known that little Yin Yun would never leave her old father alone. He also marveled at how vindictive she was, that she went looking for trouble with that eagle no matter what. Daddy's girl, well done.